Hello, this is Dyer from Divergence Analysis. We're looking at the DVAN SmartLines package available on the TradeStation TradingApp Store. As a refresher, the DVAN SmartLines package consists of three indicators. The smart lines, which are the buying and selling cycles you see overlaid on prices that create the green shading for buying cycles, red shading for selling cycles. The short-term cycle indicator, which is the green and red histogram that shows the shorter term trend within the overall longer term trend, and a leading line that shows the leading force within the shorter term trend, and the long-term bias indicator, which shows the longer term bullish or bearish bias in the security. In this case, we're looking at the Nasdaq E-mini contract on a 3-minute chart. DVAN SmartLines is applicable on all asset classes from futures, commodities, forex to equities and time frames, and other chart types other than time frames like range, Renko, volume, and tick. This is November 30th, and I wanted to go over a few examples on how we would use DVAN SmartLines to trade Nasdaq or look for trading entry and exit points and position management. I also have the DVAN pressure indicator, which is an add-on on the Trading App Store, loaded on this chart, which colors price bars either green or red for buying pressure or selling pressure dominance, depending if it's green or red. These price bar colorations really help to confirm our entry and exit points using the SmartLines package. So at the beginning of the day, 9:30 Eastern, we see prices close below the pivot, which is the middle line of the smart lines, the blue line that you see running through here. It's the main point of support and resistance in these buying and selling cycles. So we see prices close below the pivot. We see the leading line break below zero, which is showing the leading force is going negative. We see the histogram turning red in the short-term cycle indicator, showing that the short-term trend is down. And what makes this a really strong signal in particular, the long-term bias is also breaking to a bearish bias in this case as well, right after the open. All of these lead us to a confirmed short entry point that we could take. That bar closes at 9:33. It's fallen quite a bit. It's definitely okay to short at that point. A lot of times you do get a retracement, and on those retracements, good points of support or resistance to look for, in this case resistance because we're in a selling cycle, are the pivot lines. So you see in this case prices do bounce up to the pivot point. Once we're short, either here or here at the pivot point or somewhere in between, to exit we want to look for a couple things. We want to look for prices closing back inside the cycle and price bars being green. So you can see that occurs at this point. Once we see those conditions met, this is a place to start trailing your position more tightly. So rather than exiting, we don't necessarily exit because this is still in a nice selling cycle. The short-term trend is still red histogram. The bullet or the long-term bias is still bearish. We would see this point and start trailing right above its high. Ultimately, it keeps moving down, so we don't actually exit, but that's where our new stop is. We can keep moving a trailing stop down with the pivot because, as I said, ultimately that's going to be the main point of resistance. But before that happens, we close back green price bar inside the cycle again. This time, placing a stop just above the high of that bar, we would actually get stopped out and exit. So depending on if we were short around 48.72 or up around the pivot point on a retracement at 48.78, that's about a 23 to a 30 point move in the Nasdaq beginning the day. We see a few instances of the short-term cycle turning green, but what I want to point out is after you see the long-term bias, go bearish. We really want to focus on those short trades during the day. This is a way to identify the larger trend and trade in the direction of the trend that's most in favor. You can see that as the short-term trend turns green a few times, you do get some bounces, and those are playable. But I want to focus on the short trades today. If you do play these trades, if you do enter to the long side for a contrarian or a retracement trade back to the mean of this trend, the main point is to keep these trades more tight, meaning once you get some profit, trail them more tightly because they're not in the direction of the dominant trend. The next trade that is in the direction of the dominant trend occurs at 11:27 a.m. You can see leading line breaking back out of the histogram. Bearish long-term bias remains. Price is closing red, price bar below the pivot again, so this is another potential entry point. If you do miss this entry point, you can see there's another retracement back up to the pivot that can either be a re-entry point, an entry point, or a place to add to your current short position. So we would watch this trade again until prices start closing inside the cycle with green price bars, which happens at 12:18. We would place a stop right above that high and get stopped out the next bar at 12:21. So these are rough estimates, but that's 48.46 to about a high of 48.26. So that's another 20-ish point move, 20 point or so move that is playable to the short side based on the indicators given in the DVAN SmartLines package. Last trade of the day before we really get to 4 p.m. was at that's 1:39 p.m. Eastern time. We see again prices closing below the pivot red, short-term trend turning red, a red histogram bar, leading line breaking zero, bearish bias on the long-term trend remaining. This is another potential entry point. As you can see, it does bounce up to resistance again, so if you missed the trade in the first place, this is another good point to get in. Prices start closing green inside the cycle. Place a stop right above the high of that bar. It doesn't hit. Keep going down. Prices close green inside the cycle again. This would be a point to place a stop right above the high. 6 minutes later, you get out. That ends up being from about 48.33 to 48.17 or so. So that's, you know, a 16-point move in the Nasdaq. So this is a chance. Not saying this is your exact entry and exit point, but using DVAN SmartLines, this is a chance to get a few really good trades in the direction of the longer term trend with multiple confirmation points for entry and exit. Hopefully this helped. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us for a free web demo at info@divergenceanalysis.com. There are also free trials available for all of our indicators on the TradeStation TradingApp Store, which I'll include a link to in the comments of this video. Thank you.